Frosto, and I would like to welcome all of y'all to TRAP South Region Workshop. Before you get started, I would want to remind everyone seeking any CEUs to please fill out the electronic request form by using the QR code provided at the end of the session. Filling out the form before the end of the scheduled end time may result in loss of credit. If you have not done so, please turn off or silence cell phones as a courtesy to others and the speaker. If you must take a phone call, please quietly exit the room. If you leave the room and for any reasons for more than 10 minutes of the session, you will not receive any award CEUs. We have a very exciting session in store for you. The session is Exploring the Pickleball Phenomenon, Paddle Powered for Parks Progress.
Say it fast.
And now I would like to introduce the speakers. First off, I have here is Mr. William Spencer. He has been employed at MHS since 2012 and is responsible for design, project management, and construction administration for sports complex, neighborhood parks, and commercial and residential development. His involvement throughout the planning, design, and construction process allows him to have a better knowledge of every project, ensuring a high level of customer service and satisfaction beyond the industry standard. His commitment to excellence and dedication to exceed clients' expectations allows him to deliver projects at a cost-efficient and of the highest quality. In his free time, William likes to play outside with his wife and 5 kids. Next we have is John Watts. He has been employed at MHS since May 2022 as a planner. He is passionate about understanding current issues and historic trends to fostering a better setting for a city and its people to grow together. He crafts zoning, ordinance, and land use plans for small towns and rural communities and assists individuals to achieve their own development projects. As a Louisiana native, he has discovered that a foolproof way to meet people is through good food and drink, and is convinced that everyone should know how to play board games. He also likes to sing, drum, and explore the world with his wife and kids. Please give a warm welcome to William Spencer and John Watts.
We're from our Tyler office. We have a Tyler office in Dallas. When we came to San Antonio, we thought it was going to be warmer. But the Arctic blast hit down here as well. So thanks for the intro so much. My name is William Spencer. You did hear him correctly. I do have 5 children. COVID for us, not only was the launch of pickleball, but also we had COVID twins. So we did not plan on having 5 children. We get a couple of frequent questions when we say we have 5 kids. 1, we do know how that happens. 2, we do not drive a big Sprinter van. And no, we are not having any more. So, unless we'll raise it. So,
sure about that?
Medically, I'm sure about that. So, I will say to kind of start off, we will have this session posted on our website if y'all want copies of any of this data or anything like that. So, feel free to be listening and more attentive than trying to write down a ton of notes or trying to take pictures of everything. We want this to be very much interactive. Pickleball is a very, very social sport, so we want this to be full of questions, comments. We want to give you the information that y'all are wanting to hear. So with that, I'll kind of pass it back over to John.
Sure. My favorite sport to play, we pulled each other on this, shooting my kids with Nerf guns. Very basic. And like William said, I'm John Waltz. My favorite sport is Ultimate Frisbee. You have to play with Chacos. I'm a hipster by definition, I think. And we'll go into the overview here, but we did decide to pull in a local coach to get his on the ground perspective of things. So this is a multimedia presentation. Also love lo-fi. So hear what he has to say.
Being a pickleball instructor is not the easiest job in the world. Get that, get that. Get off my court. I can't believe people are paying me for this. I call this dark mauling it. Most people that play this sport are about as athletic as a box of tissues. If you dock your dinks again, I'm gonna hit you with my car. The only way to teach these people how to play is with violence and verbal abuse. Next person that docks their dinks is getting hit with the chair. I personally believe one of the best ways to get better at a sport is to be shamed into being good at it. All right, don't mess the serve up like you did your marriage. Hey, in the corner. Hey, don't look at me red. Some saying like teaching methods are a bit too aggressive. You don't look at the chair. right? I'm gonna get the chair. Personally, I don't think they're aggressive enough. I don't even understand why people like this sport. The ball doesn't even bounce properly. They just took a knockoff wiffle ball you get at like TJ Maxx and built a whole sport around it. Being a pickleball instructor is not the easiest job in the world. Get that, get that.
Okay. We want some levity here, so we are gonna ask y'all to stand up in a bit, but just to poll the room, anyone that has heard of pickleball before today, would you mind standing up, share some legs a little bit? Anyone that played pickleball? Yeah. At all? Everyone's played it?
Yeah.
Okay, once, would you say once a month? Who plays once a month?
At the time,
Once a month? Okay, Willie, how many is that?
I'm close to about 20%, once a month, once a week. Once a week, okay? More than half, 3 days a week. Let's go 3 days a week.
Depending on my work schedule.
Yeah, okay. And then daily, we have any daily pickleball players? All right, it's hard to play daily.
All the trades guys.
All right, well, that kind of lined up with the data. So we did some research for this presentation, mainly data from the Association of Pickleball. What's that one that's written on the?
Professionals, pickleball professionals.
Pickleball, and then what's the second one? I can't remember.
Sports Industry Fitness Association.
Okay, they've done all the legwork. I've just read it and summarized it. But the stats we're looking at right now, we'll get into it a little bit, but of this room, 20% of adult Americans have played pickleball at least once a month. And then 5% of adult Americans play once a week, I think. Yeah, so that's how they break it down, is the casual, if you at least heard of it, to the more hardcore players. So we're looking at 20% and then 5%. And that is growing, by the way. But overall, this is our learning objectives. We're gonna talk about the state of pickleball, the history, the stats, and the social significance. And then we're gonna talk about, as consultants, as designers, how does the city get there to be able to build a court? So, yeah, brief history, game stats, social significance. We'll start from the top. Anyone have heard of these people? Joel Pritchard? Okay, yeah, Bill Bell, Barney McCallum. So pickleball was invented in Washington, state of Washington in the 60s. So it's been around for a while. And I think Joel has been the poster child of this. He's ex-military, built the court in his backyard to really start things off. 10-ish years later, it has their next slide please. First tournament picks up in Washington. And then in the 90s, it takes over, or it's spread across the US. It gets more official in the 2000s with the establishment of the US Pickleball, which is an active organization. 2010s, it goes international. 2021, around COVID as well, so COVID and major media attention, you'll see that the number spikes. And then most recently, since last year, there's the Sports and Fitness Industry Association. They compare pickleball to other sports, third fastest growing. So overall, we have seen with stats, pickleball is here to stay, and then we're gonna go a little bit into why we think that is.
And it's interesting, California, Texas, Florida have the highest number of pickleball locations by state. So as you would imagine, warm, lots of people outside, lots of people playing.
Yes, and within Texas, Houston and Austin lead with the amount of places to play. And then Dallas is a little before it.
You didn't touch on the name, are you going to? On the name of the sport?
A little bit of controversy. I don't think it's named after their dog Pickles.
Right, that's the first story.
Yeah, was it just random?
Well, the first one is the family dog was named Pickles, and he would often chase the ball and run off with it. The second one is, it was just a mishmash of people starting to play it, and I guess in rowing, in crew, the boat with all of the leftover people is called the pickle boat. And so it's just a mishmash of random people. So those are the two stories that I heard when I first started.
I appreciate that. I heard that second part. So we'll briefly go over the statistics. Like I said, 8.9, that's the avid players, and that has since this doubled to 13 million avid players. So skyrocketing. 36 million casual players, that has increased to 48 million. So that's that 20% of adult Americans. We've seen that since 2022, the average age of pickleball players is skewing younger. So it was 55 and up was the largest cohort and the largest average. But the average has shifted to 34 years old, and the largest cohort now is 18 to 34. So it is getting to be a younger sport. Yeah, 7.7% forecasted compound rate. I don't think there's any other stats that are high level. So we'll transition to William as to kind of digging into why we think it's popular. That's all. Hand raised.
Oh no, I love squash, and so like when I saw paddleball, I was like, how do we get that here in San Antonio?
It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's paddle sports in general are one of the fastest. Pickleball, you think pickleball is the main component of why paddle sports are growing so fast. But paddleball and then U.S. Tennis Association had to compete because they were losing so many members, so they created what they call red ball. So red ball is the bottom picture down here. And then paddleball, or padel, I was corrected the other day, being padel ball. Padel ball is very much like pickleball, but it has a glass enclosure around it, so you play off the walls. So it's like squash, it's like racquetball, but in a 2v2 kind of tennis type setup. And it's growing in popularity as well. So paddle sports in general are becoming very, very, very popular. We believe that one of the primary things is just the range of players in these spaces. It's really, really, really easy to pick it up. So you can be really bad, you can go play with your friends, and you can be very, very, very social, or you can lean into it. I mean, you see pickleball on TV nowadays on a very regular basis. The payouts for those are starting to creep up, so you're starting to see a lot of money and sponsors pushed into it. So there's just this great point of entry and then a great level to advance. And there's not a whole lot of walls in between. So many sports you have to like really commit a ton of time and individual training. And pickleball, you go play with your buds, and the more you play, the better you get at it. So it's a lot of fun. It's relatively inexpensive to get into it, but you can spend a bunch. And we'll talk a little bit about this as we talk about kind of schematic planning later on and funding. But when we got our first pickleball paddle, again in COVID, we were looking for something to do with our kids. And it came with a net, came with a couple balls, but like wooden, just cheap, terrible paddles that fell apart. We got a new set about a year ago, and it came with like legit kind of graphite paddles that are really great entry point paddles for anybody. They're not wooden. The wooden paddles like rotted and they were gone immediately, but they've put some decent money into these things and a really pretty reasonable price point to get into it. So, you know, this is two examples of kind of entry level paddles nowadays with some kind of smaller entry level balls. There are kind of higher level. This is my wife and I's paddle. We have kind of mid-level paddles. We really enjoyed them. You see a lot more response, depending upon what you want to get out of them, how they're weighted, how you spin with the texture and everything. There's just different paddles as you kind of get into the sport, but just different price points. The same goes for courts. So how many of you guys, raising your hands, how many of y'all in your cities have pickleball courts, whether they're public or private? Most everybody. How many of those courts have been retrofitted? So like we have a gym, we need to do something for pickleball, so we bought nets and we're taping up courts. Several. How many of y'all have truly dedicated, or tennis courts? Some of them are tennis courts that have been restriped to fit pickleball. Yeah, several of y'all. How many of y'all have truly dedicated facilities for pickleball? Right, it's only pickleball. How many courts do y'all have at that facility?
Are you talking about what we have?
Yeah, as a city, in one
The city
location.
of San Antonio, I
Yep.
know, has
A ton of
their
them.
own courts, but
Yep.
there's also, I go kind of go around the city and play in different places. There's everything you mentioned. There's inside the basketball gyms where it's not taped anymore, the lines aren't taped. And then there's also private facilities that have dedicated pickleball. You heard the Chicken and Pickle
Chicken
chain?
and Pickle,
Well, they're
there's
here in
several
San Antonio.
offshoots now,
Yeah,
like
they're here as well.
franchise pickleball locations. Who else has some other kind of setup? Tennis that's been retrofitted. We've seen basketball pavilions retrofitted. Any other kind of retrofits or ways that y'all have done that? What's y'all's typical, raise your hand if like your pickleball courts are 4 and less. Most pretty small. Does anybody have like a 12 or more complex? Yeah? And that's really kind of as we start looking at tournaments, it's how much buy-in do you have and where do we start to put these? Because there's a blend of everything, but a wide variety of ways to invest and get involved. Yeah.
What city are you?
San Antonio.
Yeah, same thing. There's an international appeal, so it's starting to grow. It's jumped the pond, if you would say. So it's over in Europe. growing a lot right now in Europe. We already talked about some of the variants. Some of the issues. So we found pickleball and tennis, they don't play nicely. Some of it is, tennis, they don't love all the noise. They take themselves too seriously, if I'm being serious. I mean, I hate to say it, if any of y'all are like avid tennis players, it's like, pickleball seems to be a little bit just more social. And then the court demand. So those two people begin to fight. It's like, hey, we have tennis courts, now we're repurposing tennis courts for pickleball, and we don't like pickleball. So some of the issues that cities are facing right now.
Good video.
Oh, wonderful. Another exciting video.
So this is what happens when you blend the old and the new. Young adult.
So just a little fun, showing kind of the variations of how everything can blend together. All right, kind of so on to our second learning objective, kind of the process. So as we hear all this stuff, we get citizen input, hey, we need to address pickleball. How do we go about this? So we're going to touch on 4 different things. We've got master plans, which will cover, okay, hey, is pickleball truly a need? Or is this just a handful of people making a bunch of noise and we can put 1 or 2 courts? Onto a feasibility study, kind of saying, okay, yes, from the master plan, we need to do something about pickleball. Where is the most advantageous to put this? Onto kind of the schematic design of, okay, we've identified the regions, what's the right piece of property? How many courts can that property fit? And then onto always the fun conversation of, how do we pay for this, right? How do we actually go build this? So I'll pass it off to John. John's going to cover kind of the first 2, and then I'll jump back at the last 2.
Sure thing. So I am a urban planner and cartographer by trade. It's a great marriage of the 2. I love maps. I love spatial data, and we use Esri a lot. So a lot of this research or this data compiling and processing is through Esri. But master planning. So if y'all aren't aware of the overall Parks Master Plan, it's a broad city level view. If y'all are doing an update or you don't have a Parks Master Plan, this is a great place to start to integrate pickleball into the conversation. You can log all of your inventory. We've done the ad nauseum, where are your benches, where are your basketball courts, and just taking off at each park how many you have of your facilities. You can get some great public input. You can pretty much ask the public almost anything. Get some good statistics there of identifying your age cohorts, identifying what they're interested in doing. And then we process through a needs assessment. And then here in the recommendations, we normally see pickleball just broadly recommended. Every now and then you have a specific park that it's recommended for. And then implementation schedule, how much it's going to cost in relation to other capital improvements that your city wants to do. And you just try to find a good year to recommend the park improvement for pickleball courts. And a rough cost, 100,000 here and there.
And I'll add that, so with public input, y'all hear this statistically valid surveys and stuff. Groups like pickleball can often come in and flood a section of public input and make it feel like, hey, 80% of the people that responded to this survey said pickleball. Well, it could have been a group that got involved. So trying to come up with statistically valid surveying such that you can back up your decisions is important, specifically with things like this. We had one that, it wasn't pickleball, but it was like natatorium was all of a sudden #1. It turned out there was just like a swim team that kept taking the survey. So it was kind of like, okay, hey, do we really need to spend $50 million building a natatorium for a swim team? Maybe a good idea, but is that truly a community-wide service? So that kind of goes along with public input.
And we'll get to it a little bit with the funding, but with bonds, there's some strategies there on how to integrate a special use like pickleball into. To mention something else. Well, anyway, here's some questions that Parks Master Plans can start answering. Once again, identifying cohorts. Here's an example of a poll that we've done. Just put down very specific, what's important to you, pickleball actually for this town, close to the lower bottom, and then your overall satisfaction with it on a scale. And
But
then
with that, I want to say this was done probably back in 2019, 2020.
before it really.
Before that growth. So, you know, as you see these things emerging, it's often, that's why, you know, Parks Master Plans usually come in 10-year blocks, and they're requesting you to do them in 5-year updates for things specifically like this.
And then a pretty important question, and it's city by city, is it private facilities that you pay for, typically are quality, or expect public services that puts pressure on the city to maintain that, those facilities. But we will say overall master plans are where you can appeal to your city council. You have an official document, they're valuable as well. You can go for grant funding if you have a master plan. It's a great tool. So, if you have a master plan or you're a private entrepreneur, which I don't know if there's any developers in here, is it all city?
Yeah, I'll see.
All city, okay. We recommend feasibility study, honing in on, if you don't identify a specific park, where is the most optimal area to put pickleball courts? We do that by locating your target market, so that age bracket, 18 to 34, 55 and up. If you are gonna charge at the gate, then you can even do by census block, average annual income, or even interest in tennis. That's another data point that you can track. And then you do level of service, which we'll get into, and then you determine existing facilities versus where you want to put it. So highly contested, low contested. And then we plug it into a financial model at the end of this. So
The last one we actually did was for a private developer, and the answer was, hey, it doesn't make sense. He had already bought the property. It's like, hey, it doesn't make sense for you to put this here. He didn't love that answer.
it was a blended facility and it was a lot. Mainly the indoors where it really skyrockets in cost. So like I said, Esri, just a workhorse, I love it. Lots of querying by the census block level, so a lot of this data is leveraged on the 2020 census, but they do a great job of integrating other proprietary data. Some of it I don't understand, some of it I do, but it just integrates in of like, how do y'all even know this information? For this one, we did a dual variable of population density to median age to try to figure out where those key players are. But what's good is a percentage. You kind of need some comparison to see how your city's doing with others. So we do recommend finding some other sister cities, maybe one that you want to emulate, one that's doing poorly, kind of compare it to. So for this project, we specifically did a lot of legwork, and I will say there is no one website that tracks where your courts are. Pickleheads is great, but I was doing a lot of legwork to get an account of indoor and outdoor courts, and then just track the rates at what they're going by. Most of them they do charge. There's actually very few that are free from what I found. All right, next slide. So level of service, pickleball is so new that I have not seen an official level of service, and mostly parks people in here, y'all know what level of service is? For the most part. It's per 1,000 people, pretty much how many people is your park serving, and it's based on an area. So spatially, you can identify where gaps are, where your population concentrations are, and where your gaps in service are. For pickleball, because it's so new, we don't have that variable, so I just practically said, hey, 15-minute drive time. And so that boundary there is based on drive time on routes. And we were able to identify existing courts within those 15-minute thresholds. And that led us to the next bit of data, is where it's most contested and least contested. In this city, the pink was more contested, so we recommended simply the greener areas, less contested. And that's also where your populations are. And great results, client was pleased. And I think that's it for feasibility. And so the next stage is schematic design. Once you've identified your location.
So schematic design, this is really where we get to kind of dream about what do we want out of this. And the process is really built for how do we truly serve the pickleball population as a whole. You know, there may be some ways that we can hit some stop gaps of, hey, we need pickleball courts now, we don't have time to go do a master plan, feasibility study, schematic design, find funding, then go do construction documents, then go build this thing. We need the problem solved now. So that's where coming up with ideas of like, how do we retrofit things like we talked about earlier. But as we begin to look and think about, okay, is this really gonna stick around, and do we need to come up with a long-term solution, right? Painting, or taping down courts in a repurposed gym may not be the ultimate solution. But this is where we start to dream of like, okay, what is the optimal number of courts? How many courts could we hold, and do we need to have for a tournament? So that maybe as a city, we could start generating revenue. Do we have that area? Do we have the right piece of property? So in the schematic design process, we begin to populate from the master plan what needs to go in this park. You know, do we need restrooms? Do we need to have them indoor? Do they need to be outdoor? Do there need to be other services? So at this project, you'll see kind of a main building area with some restrooms. There was a game area, and then this one only had 2 pickleball courts because it was more of a neighborhood park that we were dropping in. As we start to look at true pickleball dedicated facilities, we say like a true tournament facility needs to have at least 12 pickleball courts. And then that grows out from that. We were talking with the U.S. Pickleball Association, with the city. They were trying to drop in their national headquarters, and they were looking at putting 60 to 80 pickleball courts at one location. That's how big they hold the national tournament there. But when you start running the numbers on this, you think, okay, on a tennis court, you can put 3 to 4 pickleball courts, depending upon how you strike it. In pickleball, most of the time you're playing doubles. So you've got, let's go with easy, 4 pickleball courts with 4 people on each court. That's 16 people per one court. That's one tennis court, where you would have at most 4 people. So if I'm running a tournament, I've just grown my revenue by 12, what is that, 12, 500%, something like that. You've grown this thing, 400%. So financially, for the city, when we start to do these things with tournaments, financially it pencils out. Just because of the amount of area that it takes up and then the interest. So a pickleball tournament for like the national tournament can have up to 1,200 people on the same space that you would have 400 people for tennis. They're all paying roughly the same registration cost. So financially, that's where you start to see so many competing professional pickleball leagues. They're all fighting for that dollar amount. That's why you see so much money poured into marketing things right now. So coming up and having that schematic design and understanding, okay, what is it that we're trying to do here? What area are we trying to serve? It's very, very important. That the finances and the numbers doc all kind of play out that way.
Yeah, and you get your population excited. It's a pretty picture, great for marketing.
Oh yeah. So with schematic design, these are kind of the 5 big things that you want to kind of consider, because through this, you're trying to figure out, okay, how much do I need to spend big picture? You need to think about the overhead. How are we going to operate this facility? You're going to have to buy the land unless you already have it. You're going to have to build this thing. There is ongoing maintenance, so we're going to have to build that in. And then something is going to happen out there that is unexpected. You may have a population group. We were talking with another city about a pickleball complex, and out of nowhere, they were like, hey, we also want a dog park. And a group got excited, so we ended up putting a dog park in there. And having just kind of this war chest contingency, we were able to kind of build that in, especially on the schematic design side, because you haven't worked out all the details. So on to the fun one, right? How are we going to pay for this one? We're going to mention a lot of big words that, I don't have all the information about this. So there's several ways that you can go pay for this, because a big pickleball complex costs several $1 million if we're going to go about this and build this the right way. One is tax notes. So tax notes, this is something that as the city you can issue tax notes. There's no election, there's no notice, and there's a 7-year maturity date. So what we recommend on tax notes is that you don't go and request several $1 million for this. This is if, hey, I need to put in 2 pickleball courts to solve a short-term need. This is a quick way for you to go talk to your city managers and say, or parks directors, and say, hey, listen, we have this need in this neighborhood. We need 2 pickleball courts. Let's go build these. I think a tax note's a good way to go about it. A certificate of obligation. This one is another one, like maybe we need a little bit more money than that. A certificate of obligation is essentially, it's almost like a bond, but it does not have to go out to the public. This is something your city council can say, yes, we're interested in it.
The only way it goes out for election is if 5% of the people protest. So there is a public input period. City council is considering certificates of obligation for 6 pickleball courts at Stewart Park. Let us know what you think. If they petition, we're considering, if they petition, then you go out for an actual election. From there, it gets down to the general obligation bonds. And we always say, if you're looking at a big, we talked about that natatorium that I mentioned earlier, that one was gonna go out for general obligation. Big spending. That's where election is required. You know, your city council, your city's not gonna take on that debt unless there's massive public input behind that and support.
And they're big, I mean, y'all seen the controversial ones, right? They make the news, bond gets voted down. We did some bond research a year ago, 2 years ago, tracked about 5 years worth of data. A trend that we've noticed is the bigger the bond, so the bigger the dollar amount, actually the more successful it is because you're appeasing so many people. It's simply, you're just spreading the love out, you're addressing the pickleballers, you're addressing sewage projects, like it's a very diverse. So diversity, in this case, you get more votes. So it makes sense to us.
Specifically for general obligation, that's kind of where if you go back and it's like, hey, we need pickleball complex. I would not recommend going out for a general obligation for just pickleball, because you're only gonna get the pickleball people to show up. You need to get something that's gonna cover the broad population. The next one is kind of sales tax revenue bonds. Again, this one kind of goes along with tax notes, so there's no election. They can issue these at any point in time. Some people have half-cent sales tax programs where you go to the half-cent sales tax board and you request, hey, we need to go build these 4 pickleball courts at Stewart Park. We need to get this on this list for the half-cent sales tax for the sales tax board so they can begin thinking about improving that. The last one, which is some of our favorites and some of the city's favorites, are these grants, right? Everybody loves free money. So Texas Parks and Wildlife, they're next door talking about something similar to this. They have local parks grants. So they have 2 different ones that really apply to these kind of complexes. Non-urban and urban. Non-urban is less than 500,000. Urban is greater than 500,000. It is a 50-50 matching bond, or a matching grant. So let's say we have a $1.5 million project. The city puts up 750, and then the state, if approved, will put up 750. This is something that for a while, you can go build these neighborhood parks. So maybe a 2 to 4 court complex. You could come in and build with a local grant through Texas Parks and Wildlife. One of the hurdles is kind of this timeline. Submittals for these park grants are in the fall usually, August, September. It takes about 6 months for them to award those, get contracts, and then to get design and everything approved through them. So it takes a little over a year to get all the way through the process where you're ready to go through construction. That is one of the hurdles with free money. You gotta appease the federal government with everything. So,
And parks master plans aren't required, but they definitely give you some points.
yeah, if you're trying to stand out, Dan with Parks and Wildlife, again, next door, he came over, we were talking. They had 100 people submit for parks grants, roughly 100 people submit this last round, and he said about half of those would get funded. So you have to try and stand out. How are you gonna stand out against everybody? By going kind of through this process shows you that this project is wanted, that we're gonna do it. They don't want somebody that's kind of like, okay, hey, we thought about pickleball courts, I'm gonna draw them, I'm gonna submit them. There's gotta be some intent just for you to be able to stand out against the other 100 people that are submitted. The last ones, and this is one of those, we talk about retrofits, short-term solutions that, hey, we need a problem today. USA Pickleball has some grants around 10,000. That's oftentimes good for restriping, maybe some entry-level equipment, and then AARP flagship, 500 to 50,000, depending upon what the request is. So there are funding ways to go about it. Why is the process so important? It really kind of comes down to the dollar amounts. If you're going to go ask for money for these kind of things, you need to know that you're asking for a project that is really, really needed for your community. So. With that, kind of going back to our learning objectives, just kind of 2 big things, kind of understanding the history, the statistics, the social impact. We honestly believe pickleball is here to stay. I think, me personally, the money that has been put into this sport over the last couple of years and the growth, now it may not continue to be the highest growing sport, but I think it's going to be here. You see a dropping of the age where younger people are starting to get involved in this, specifically as they get into college, young professional levels. They're playing with their
their spouses, they're going on dates to do this. It's here to stay. So having that and understanding that this is sticking around allows you to kind of come in and understand, hey, what do we as an individual city need to be doing about this? Are we addressing this? Are private developers coming in to fix the problem for us? And we don't really need to deal with this. Are we trying to compete with private developers? Where do we as a city and a community fit in? Is it a blend? So that's kind of everything. I do want to open it up for questions. Pickleball is a lot of fun. Hopefully the videos were fun and goofy, but what questions do you guys have right now with it? Or what situations, circumstances are you guys facing in your communities that you're like, I just don't know what to do next? Has anybody felt push up? Yeah, back in the back.
How have y'all done with, because y'all had said that 18 to 35 is the fastest growing. We primarily deal with a lot of the youth. So how have y'all like gotten the attention of like younger kids, like 10 to 14?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that, especially in youth sports in general, having a space for them to go practice and play with either an instructor or, I mean, I have a middle school son. He just wants to ride his one wheel up and play pickleball with his buddies. So making sure we have those spaces. But the issue with middle schoolers going to play pickleball by themselves is they're idiots. I mean, we all, my son,
Yeah.
it's like, I talked to him the other day, it's like, what are you even thinking? But they just love to go be social. My dad said it right. He was like, man, kids that age want to be seen. They just want to go somewhere and be seen. So I think creating a space that allows them to be seen, and even having an instructor there that can somewhat help facilitate positive development, for the most part, that does a lot for them. Simple instruction of like, oh yeah, now I understand it. You know, Billy used to be so much better than me, but I fixed 2 to 3 things, and now I can play against Billy. Like, that's what's great about this sport is it does have a low point of entry. So with youth specifically, I think finding the right spaces for them and allowing them to come do that in a safe, creative space has been what we have found to have been very beneficial. And that goes for most sports. You know, whether that's soccer or lacrosse or football, you know, most sports like that.
And if you're trying to implement it, target the parents for votes and just say, hey, it's a safe, creative sport, doesn't care if it joins.
Summer camps, you know, summer camps are a great way to do that. Parents are always looking for good summer camp opportunities for their kids. So, great question. How has the tennis community been receiving this for y'all? Y'all hear much back and forth with them? We always hear mixed emotions with this. Just some chuckles. Y'all know the person I'm talking about.
I have a 18 pickleball courts on one of my sites and then 10 tennis courts. So they're always like, why are they always here? Why are they, playing music? We're trying to, it's a social, everybody's trying to have fun, good time, and
Yeah.
they don't like the I'm like, and they're trying to like do a private lesson. I'm like, I don't know what you want me to tell you, but they're doing their thing, they're playing.
Yep.
So it's constantly back and forth.
It's tough, and that is one of the things we believe as this sport continues to evolve, you will have designated pickleball complexes and you'll have designated tennis complexes. I think that they are going to be separated, where it's just kind of as it evolves. One of the interesting things that has evolved with all of this is there is now, you have spacing requirements for pickleball courts from residential because of the noise. And that is something, I think it's 200 yards at this point in time. I think they're petitioning for it to get bigger, just because of the noise that it does create. Again, that's part of the fun. I mean, I love smashing it and making as much noise as possible, taking all the frustration out. Part of it, man. Part of it. But that's part of the social side, and that's part of the fun and the draw with it all. So,
As an industry, I know they're trying to address the noise issue in 2 ways. The paddle manufacturers, I know there's one out there, I forget the brand, but it's supposed to be a quieter paddle.
that dampening system.
Yeah, and then on the ball side, there are 2 things that I heard about. One was a 3D printed ball.
Okay.
And the other is a foam ball that supposedly is gonna act exactly like the plastic ball, but without the noise. So
Interesting.
the industry knows it's an issue, and they're trying to address it.
Yep. That's great. And it's growing and evolving. Like, there are inherent issues like we talked about, and they are trying to address that, and there's money behind it to address it.
I'm glad they're working out the dinks, pun intended,
Yeah.
early on, because I imagine there's a lot of hesitation on changing anything with the professional players. As far as like friction, the paddle, the.
Yeah. There's been all kinds of controversy as to, it's just like with golf, they had to set some limits on what the equipment can do, right? So now pickleball is in the same situation with paddles. They're getting too powerful and they're setting the standards. Some paddles, maybe it was last year, I think, and a couple of professional tournaments, people showed up with illegal paddles, because they didn't meet the.
It's like the cord bats from back in the day. It's
Right.
like-
So it's like a regulatory not correction,
Right.
maybe, yeah. Which is kind of taking away the fun, flexible energy of the sport, but I think it's
But
natural.
as a recreational player, who cares?
Yeah.
You know, You're a rec golfer, use whatever club you want.
On the planning side, you said strategically you want to put something within 15 minutes of where somebody has access to a pickleball court. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes, and that's a gut call. That's, hey, I'm in the shoes of, what do I wanna do today? Play pickleball? Am I gonna drive 30 minutes? I'd argue no. Just say, hey.
When it goes back to level of service of neighborhood parks,
Yeah, that's what I'm going with. So, let's say we sit down with the developer. All right, we're gonna develop the way we work. We sit down with the developer. Say, okay, we need a park here. All right, we got park improvement fees from how we work it out, right? And so then, let's say we're on the north side of town. We got 3 parks already there, but we got no pickleball courts, right? So we're trying to get into the developers. So, well, we need some pickleball courts so they can build the pickleball courts instead of another pocket park.
Yep, no, absolutely. And there's a blend. I mean, we see this you see this in the playground industry as well. It's like everybody wants to have all playgrounds everywhere, fully inclusive with court in place. And that's an expensive playground. Well, if you have one in specific service areas like pickleball, you don't need pickleball at probably every neighborhood park. You probably do need it in a region. And that's kind of back to the feasibility studies of where's the highest value for us to put this for y'all, such that as a developer comes in, you can say, hey, yeah, no, we kind of targeted this through our master plan to have pickleball in this area. Who is your neighborhood targeting? What are you doing there? I will say, specifically with that kind of business model, if developers come in, are they dedicating that land as city parkland? One thing to remember, just kind of a cheat code, if you take that land and you dedicate it as parkland, you could not use it as a match for the grant. But there's a foundation, Parks and Wildlife has a foundation. You can take the land and put it in the Parks and Wildlife Foundation such that when you're ready to do a grant, you can use that land as your match. So you get a $750,000 park for free. Because your match as the city has been the land that was given to you by the developer.
Okay.
So just kind of a workaround of like, even with a 50-50 grant, I go find $750,000. You don't, because you have the land and that is a value, that is an asset. So, pretty interesting.
Wow.
Yep.
This is Alex. My name is Max. We're here with Compan Playgrounds.
Yeah.
So we do, we're a Danish company. We've done some really cool parks.
Absolutely.
In the city of San Antonio. And one of the things that we've begun realizing is because pickleball is growing the way that it is, in situations like the one that you have, sir, where you're like, how do we designate an area? Is we have these like multi-use gaming areas, right? They're kind of enclosed, encapsulated sport courts that have a basketball functionality, that have a small indoor soccer functionality, but because of the type of surfacing that's being used, they're able to stripe it in a way where if a couple of pickleball courts want to also be included within that, so that you can bring some of the younger kids in, and sometimes it's close to a playground, sometimes it's all by itself, but if you want to bring the younger kids in, they're initially going to start with the basketball or the soccer, but then they're going to get curious about what the other lines are for, or they'll see some practices going on when they bring up the net specifically for the pickleball, and it's giving the sport the ability to introduce it slowly if it's not something that's completely being accepted yet. So some of the parks departments that we're working with nationwide, like, well, now we're including all of these different sports entities, but really the underlying thing was, hey, we really want to get pickleball introduced to this community.
Yeah.
And so this is how we're gonna do it, we're kinda gonna throw it in there.
So are you saying that the floors are multi-purpose? Like a
Yes.
multi-purpose for
Yeah.
different sports?
100%, yeah, we've got some really great products that we're designing.
So the blend of basketball, futsal, and pickleball, they all kind of, because of the space of that court, you can
Because of the space of that
fit it
court,
in
yeah.
really nicely. And the systems, I think the systems y'all are talking about, y'all have the integrated lights with them as well.
We do, yeah.
So that's one of the cool things. I think one of the biggest costs when we look at new pickleball courts, a pickleball court by itself, pre-stressed foundation, nets, lights, about $100,000. So you can begin to add those things up depending on how you want. But what's great about theirs is you can come in and resurface and add lights, and it's a lot more economical to kind of be a launching point to figure out if this is gonna stick for your specific community.
I'm finding a lot more of that with, I'm doing work with Fort Sam Houston and Fort Cavazos, the military installations. They put such a huge emphasis, I'm a military brat and I'm a veteran as well, but in the 70s and 80s, they put such huge emphasis on tennis courts.
Yep.
And now they have all these open tennis courts that now they're converting into outdoor fitness centers, and they're starting to do more of the pickleball stuff there because the foundation is already there.
It's still good,
So that, yeah, and it's still good stuff, so they just resurface it, they line it, and it's saving them a fortune rather than starting something from scratch.
Yep.
Yeah.
One of the great things about the tennis courts, most tennis courts are pre-stressed, which means they're pulled cables. You tension them, you pour the concrete, you release it, so you don't have to have all the, like saw joints that you see on here, you don't see the stress cracks here. Everything is tight, so you only have hairline cracks. When you have cracks in tennis courts or pickleball courts, it impacts the game significantly. But when they're built like that, they don't move much, they move together, and they don't crack. So you can really simply repurpose it. So many people have made the mistake, I've seen a bunch, they built pickleball courts with a standard foundation, so it's not pre-stressed, and they've had saw joints in the middle, and it's thrown off the game, and then you have these cracks that run through the middle of the court, and 3 years into it, 2 years into it, they're like, these courts are unplayable. You know, we've gotta come in, we've gotta resurface it with asphalt, so, you know, making sure you build that foundation correctly, even if that means, hey, we're not gonna put lights up immediately, we're gonna put lights up in a year. Let's make sure that foundation is correct and we can build up from that. So, great question, and I love the integration of play with it, because parent of 5, if I tell my wife I'm going to play pickleball, she's like, you owe me one. But if we get to go and take the kids and they go play, that's a family outing and it's a win for everybody.
Absolutely.
So, how are we doing on time? Where are we at? We got about 2 or 3 more minutes?
Yeah, about 4 minutes.
So, anything else? I love the communication, guys. That's what this is about. Is there anything else on somebody's mind? Yeah.
You want to host a pickleball tournament? What's the usual concept? Like round robin, or how does it go?
Yeah, so we've seen it done several different ways. I think my biggest frustration with pickleball tournaments, I was in one that was single elimination. Man, pickleball games are so quick, don't do single elimination. I think you can easily do a round robin and take top 1 or 2 and then move them out. I've even seen consolation brackets where it's double elimination that have worked really, really well. I think a lot of it's based on numbers and how long you want this thing to go on. But pickleball is great because you play and then you get to socialize. But if you have too long of a gap between playing and socializing, you kind of get disinterested a little bit. So I think making sure you manage that. I would say the only thing not to do is A, have single elimination, and B, have big gaps between when you play. If that makes sense. So number of courts is a big dictator on what that structure is. Does that help at all?
I'm gonna give out our award. Free pickleball.
Huh?
The free pickleball. Are you still-
Yeah, so we will. We've got. I'm not going to give away my paddles, but we do have a paddle and a pickleball. If y'all are interested and don't have a paddle and a pickleball, we'd love for y'all to grab one or both. But thank you guys for coming. My name's William Spencer. This is John Waltz. Our contact information is up here. The QR code goes to our website. We'll get this session uploaded on the website if y'all want to go back through it. But if you have any questions, give us a shout. We're here. We want the sport to grow. I really, really enjoy it. And my kids really enjoy it. So it's fun. It's here to stay. So thanks everybody. CEUs. I know that we need to.
Yes.
We've got the